Today we're going to be going over my top most expensive ball pythons, at least at the time that I got them. Looking back at animals that you invested in and then how much your return on investment is or has been over time is a really good way to determine future buying strategies. No matter what, as combos become more produced, become more complex, and become more available, supply and demand is going to dictate that the animals that you invested in are going to come down in some way, shape, or form over the course of time. Now, I won't be discussing the exact amount I paid for them because in some cases I got really incredible deals that are not reflective of the actual cost of these animals at a market-based value, but I will be discussing what their value was at the approximate time that I got them and what they are now. Without wasting any further time, let's get into our very first one, or ones I should say, because I'm combining this into one big project that I purchased into. And these were the first animals I purchased before I had even ever bred. And this was a very long time ago, and I called up Garrett Meyer with Royal Constrictors. I purchased two pied het albino breeder females. Actually, one of them at the time was 66% het albino. Ironically, and the first time I paired them together, I got visuals. So that one ended up being 100%, which was great for me. And at the time, these animals were going for well over $1,000. We also got one male that was an albino het pied. And the objective, of course, was to create albino pieds. Pieds were still going for around $400 as babies. And at the time, I remember the cardinal rule for a breeder pied for females anyways was considered to be $1 a gram. Looking at this girl right here, you can see that that is effectively the case here. You have an animal that's roughly around 1,000 grams and well, it sold for $1,000. Nowadays, babies I've seen vary. You can see them anywhere from around $200 for a female to about $150 to $200 for a baby male pied. You can find proven breeders for as low as $350 with the het albino in it as well. We are in an era right now where proven breeders are pretty wildly available. The reason for this is because people have evolved their collection to have even more power to it. So that means that space needs to be made, which means that some of these animals with a little bit less oomph to them might be offered up to people who want a proven breeder now. But at the time that I invested, it was a pretty penny. But was this investment a good one? Well, it was, because for a long time there, they were getting a good amount of money and I was making a good amount of them. I still have all three of these animals today, including some of their babies that I've kept for creating albino pieds, because I still absolutely love creating this combo every year, even though obviously they are not getting what they were getting when I first made them. I'm okay with that. It's cool that now I can sell these as basically pet level projects to a lot of people, and they still honestly make great breeder level pets. The pieds and albinos mesh well together, and they're still a very iconic combo in my opinion, making it one of the better investments, especially early on, that I did when I had less than 5 snakes. Another expensive project that I got into, well, a few years ago at this point, was the puzzle, and specifically we secured a sterling puzzle. And if you don't know, a sterling puzzle is a super pastel cinnamon puzzle. Ours was also possible het daddy or weirdo, however you want to say it. A lot of people think that they might be the same thing. That girl actually laid early last year. She got 2 size and bred in just under 2 years. I've never heard anything like it, but she was absolutely 2 size, about 1,600 grams. And the only reason I paired her was because she stopped eating and I tried to get her to eat, and then suddenly she laid eggs after basically 2 20-minute pairings, and I never saw a lock during that time, but clearly it happened, and it produced me my very first het puzzle, het monarchs. Roughly at one time, a sterling puzzle would run about $1,750, give or take a bit. The reason I originally got into it was to create puzzle monarchs, and well, I have that building block now. She gave us some eggs and I ended up getting a male and a female. They passed the cinnamon along. One of them passed the puzzle along. I'm pretty sure that we got that weirdo gene to go along with it as well. So I was certainly pleased, and this year we're actually breeding her to make puzzles, specifically with banana and yellow belly in the mix and all sorts of cool stuff. We hope to bring you those eggs later this year, in fact. But what would they get right about now? Well, for a standard puzzle, it's about $700 and about $450 for a male. So what do pewter puzzles go for nowadays? Well, it's a little difficult to honestly say, but the pricing hasn't really gone down all that much on a sterling. Some of the earliest I could find were from about 1.5 years ago at this point, still going at about $1,200. We also found this cinnamon puzzle, which is far more reflective of current times because, well, it's still theoretically available. It's still listed at the moment, but it is just a cinnamon puzzle. It does not have the pastel or even the super pastel or the weirdo at play here. If I had to guess, it would probably still be floating around that $1,000 mark, give or take a little bit, but still a really, really cool combo that has held its value quite well. Now, has it been a good investment for me? Well, it's a little too early to tell. sell, because I haven't done any sales yet, but if we're looking specifically at the hold decks I've already created, then the answer is yes. We created them with different genetics, with cinnamon and whatnot in there, but that could theoretically make things even more costly. In fact, here's a male pastel cinnamon, also with chocolate, double het Monarch puzzle that's going for quite a bit more. So just from the listing prices, it has definitely made its worth. And of course, we won't actually have any return on investment until, well, we create the actual double visuals that we're actually going for. And we want cinnamon to be a key part to how that's really going to look all in the end. A lot of times you have to wait quite a bit of time to see how it all plays out. But I definitely would have to say that this was a very good investment on our part. One of our next biggest investments that we made was into the Pixel project. Again, I won't discuss what I got into Pixel for, but I was very, very happy to get into the project, and it wasn't quite expected. Pixels have gone for an incredible amount because it is a relatively rare gene. It's still a very selective project, meaning there's not a whole bunch of examples out there for sale. As you can see, something like this red striped yellow belly pixel just about 2.5 years ago was going for a pretty lofty amount here at $7,500. Now, the animal we have is a Pixel Cypress het genetic stripe. I plan to eventually work the Pixel gene into Clown and combine it with things like GHI and maybe even Confusion in the future. There's a lot of different things that I personally want to work with this. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of Pixels available to this day, and most of them are still floating around the $3,000 or more mark. Pixel is obviously a project that brings incredible pixelation to the side. I believe recently it was just proven that there is a super form for this. One of the things that we would love to make is something like this. We just showed this off in a recent video of our top 10 most favorite genetics being in Confusion, and how awesome an animal like this looks even without any recessives present whatsoever. So a very quick one here, but did Pixel make its worth for us? Well, we haven't reproduced any, but we are hoping that we do get eggs this year. Given how much that I invested into it, I am incredibly confident that I will have a very good investment. I am incredibly excited to work this, especially with the Cypress gene, because I've really wanted to get into Cypress and add that into Clown projects. To have Pixel along with that was incredible. I happened to luck into this animal actually just searching for something with Cypress and happened to see this, even though I did not have the het Clown that I was hoping for. Given that the Pixel gene was along for the ride, I definitely wanted to consider this animal, and it ended up working out perfectly fine. I can't wait to get the combination of what the Pixel and the Cypress can do, especially when I combine it with things like GHI and later on Confusion, and eventually even going for that visual Clown version with all this awesomeness in it. Next up would be a GHI Spotnose Clown, which we affectionately named King. He was also 66% het hypo, and again, I can happily say that he ended up proving out as het hypo, adding a ton of value to him. However, I did not purchase him as het hypo, although I definitely pivoted to do a lot of different projects once I found out. So we're just going to look at what GHI Spotnose Clowns went for. I, at the time, of course, wanted to go for some really cool Batmans and all sorts of stuff. I love the GHI gene, so it kind of just made sense to me in terms of what I could do with an animal like this. Females were even more. Their going price was around $3,000 at the time. My boy has created quite a bit for me. We've used him now for quite so many years. The fact again that he was het hypo added a tremendous amount of value to him. In fact, we hit our very first Batman pairing him to a girl who was het pied, and we also proved her out through a genetic test with RGI and got such incredible luck that the Batman ended up being het pied and het hypo, and he was a boy and he is staying with us. He's also Orange Dream, Pastel. He is a pretty good male that we plan to put into a triple recessive project in a couple seasons. But what's the value now of these animals? Well, as you can see from the same breeder, they have come down a decent amount, which for an animal that is 1 recessive and 2 incomplete dominants kind of sort of makes sense. As these things start to be churned out, again, supply and demand does come down. Females are a little bit more, sitting at around $900. So you can get into this project for a lot cheaper than I did. But did this investment end up proving out for me? Yes, it most definitely did, especially with the great odds I have had and the fact that, of course, he ended up proving as het hypo. But even if he hadn't, it still would have been a very good investment for me. Albeit probably not as much as the others I mentioned here, but I definitely do not regret this guy. He has helped out my collection and my breeding projects quite a bit, and we still have wonderful plans for him to this day. The next most expensive animal that we've ever invested in was a GHI black pastel red stripe yellow belly clown that ended up being 50% het hypo. This is not the exact one, but it is from the breeder. We had our eyes set on making some sort of a Pompeii, and the fact that, again, one of my favorite genetics being GHI was in this mix added quite a bit of oomph to it. It didn't hurt that I had already known at this time that my boy was now het hypo and that the girl I purchased was also 50% het hypo. Now, sadly, she did not prove out as het hypo, otherwise that would have been an absolute dream come true. But my boy has had a very good track record of passing his het hypo along, so who knows if that's maybe in their babies. This girl was incredible when we got her, and she is incredible to this day. She's absolutely beautiful, and she has aged perfectly. I often have said I think that she might actually look better, so I could not be happier with the quality of this animal. She is not ready to breed yet, but how is this value today? Well, there's really no examples right now. In fact, the only example that is up there is the actual GHI Pompeii, the visual example of getting that one other elusive gene that I want to put into from that GHI Spotnose that I just mentioned. I, of course, would love to create the GHI Pompeii. I would love to also take a stab at seeing what a super GHI Pompeii would look like. So there really hasn't been much change in the cost. That's probably a good thing considering that I just got that animal about a year and a half ago. But she should be ready next season. She was not up to size this season, even though she got somewhat close. I would rather her have one more year and produce amazingly awesome, hopefully large clutches. But yes, I still am feeling good about this investment. It is technically too early to tell, but the fact that he's still going for around the same price pretty much tells you everything you need to know. Finally, for our last one and my favorite project would be my Monarch Milk Dud. I got Milk Dud from Tom Harbing. I don't even remember exactly when. I was researching this project quite extensively. I wanted to get into a recessive project that was a bit bigger, that still had a lot of room to grow. Not completely ground level, but pretty close. And I wanted to jump ahead and start creating awesome hets because let's face it, there's still a lot of things, a lot of avenues that you can go in. And Monarch is probably one of the better ones that has so much more room to grow. Monarch boys, I believe, were exactly the same price, if not maybe even a little bit more, because if you think about it again, males will be able to pass on, especially if you're trying to create double hets or bring other genetics into the projects. They're going to be able to breed much quicker. So that is what I wanted, and that is what I got. I ended up picking up het females to actually reproduce the combo so that I can just make my own Monarchs as well. I've explained why Monarch is one of my favorites. The contrast on this animal is absolutely one of the best, if not the best, I've ever seen. The yellows and whatnot pop. They're very, very beautiful, but honestly, it's about what the color in between the pattern. It is about that burgundy, nearly plum looking color in some cases. But what do Monarchs go for now? Well, it has dropped, but the listing price is still a considerable amount. Males and females are still roughly about the same price, but the males are now starting to dip in some cases below the females, which is somewhat normal as they become more available and, well, they start to reproduce themselves a little bit more. And remember, this is just for the single gene. It's not up there with Monsoon or anything like that, but it's no slouch, that is for sure. Still to this day, these animals command a good amount. Now, of course, our hope is to create such amazing animals as this within the Pied projects with Monarch that have such incredibly deep contrasts with these incredibly beautiful popping colors, bright and dark at the same time. Or, of course, something as incredible as this animal here with its nearly literal plum coloring. This animal, in fact, was where I fell in love with the project. Obviously, the Monarchs by themselves are gorgeous, but when I saw the potential with just a double visual with Spotnose, I was absolutely in love. This has so much further it can go. Can you imagine a Monarch Pompeii? That right there would be the most killer snake on the planet Earth, bar none. So just from a purely monetary standpoint, was Monarch a good investment for us? Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't wait to start producing my own. It will be very well worth it. Of course, all we talked about today was just the monetary values of things. Were they worth it from an investment standpoint? I want to be very cautious in saying that you should never breed only with profit specifically in mind, but it is important to pay attention to, especially if you did want to look at this as something that you could generate some revenue from, or at the very least pay yourself back. And looking back on the animals that you had purchased and determining whether you did a good job or not, I think is an incredible skill that you should master so that you can best enable and learn from your successes and maybe the ones you didn't quite so hit well on. Hope you enjoyed the video and learned something from it. If you like this video, you can actually check out our deep dive on the Monarch morph right here, or some of our past prior Tinley walkthrough videos right here.